But the good news for us in the gospel this morning is that God's kingdom is very near. As these things are taking place, and these things have been taking place for quite some time, we believe as faithful followers of Jesus that God's kingdom is very near. The challenge for us, I believe, is that we have that courage that I like to talk about before in that prayer. We have that courage to be willing to stand still in the midst of everything and raise our heads, and when raising our heads, raising our hearts to God's nearer presence. What happens, though, for me and what happens for many of us in our lives is that when we get stuck in fear and foreboding, and I would say a lot of what we read in Luke's gospel in this section is about chaos. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty. What happens for us is that we can lose a sense of trust in God. Why is this happening? We can experience our hope waning with worry for what we will see when we lift our heads. Because lifting our heads when the world is going crazy around us, when there's fear and foreboding, that's not the natural inclination. When there's a lot of things happening, you know what I want to do? It's probably what a lot of you all want to do. If there's stuff, all sorts of things happening, I want to do this. That's what I want to do. I've done it quite often, actually. I want to do that. I want to tuck and run. I want to take cover. You know, we have the modern day preppers where they have all sorts of stuff in their basement or their attic to make sure they have enough of whatever. If the end comes near, I'm going to be glad to be with my family, I think. We're weighed down with worry, and we're not sure what we will see when we lift our heads. Are many of you familiar with the movie As Good as It Gets? Anyone? I know that there are several people in here who could be familiar with the generations of folks we have in here. It feels like the movie's not that old to me, but it's from 1997, which is fairly old compared to where we are today, I guess. But it's a romantic comedy film, and Melvin Udall, played by Jack Nicholson, is a very, very successful novelist, but he also has this mental and this physical condition where he has a bit of neurotic issues, if you will. In the movie, he has a bad attitude. He experiences obsessive-compulsive disorder. He has alienated himself from pretty much everyone by the issues of his disease. He comes in contact with Carol Connolly, who was played by Helen Hunt, at the diner where he regularly eats. She serves as his waitress. It's because of her and because of others in the movie that he begins, I say Jack Nicholson, but really the character was Melvin, that Melvin begins to question his current status in life. And the quote that stands out to me, and that is for the namesake of the movie, what if this is as good as it gets? He is there in a therapist room, or in his physician's waiting room, waiting to go in. He's quite agitated. He barges into the psychiatrist's office asking for help. The doctor says he will have to make an appointment. Seems rational to me. And the novelist then enters into the psychiatrist's lobby with all the other patients, and he turns to all of them sitting there waiting for their appointments and says, what if this is as good as it gets? I think that during times of great anxiety, during times in our life when there are uncertainties, when there's a certain amount of chaos, things aren't as we'd expected, and we might be confused with certain outcomes possibly, I think that it can become easy for us to think that life is hopeless and without meaning. The thing that we tend to forget in these situations is that life, I believe, in our relationship with Jesus always has a sense of hope and tends to be somewhat what we make of it, because God always comes to us giving hope. God's kingdom is always near to us. But in those moments, it's important for us to be willing and to have the courage to acknowledge the grief, to acknowledge the worry, to acknowledge the fear of chaos. But equally important in this is the need to lift our heads and our hearts through it all, to allow for our loving God to connect with me, to allow God to connect with us. It takes great courage to stand still. Here I am before you, waving my arms around like I do Sunday after Sunday. We know that for public speaking, it will be much better for me to do what? Don't say be quiet. For public speaking, it would be better for me to stand with my shoulders back and for me to stand with my arms down, my hands at my side. You know how hard that is? Especially in front of a room full, I know Ariel does, and she can laugh at me. To stand with your arms at your side and talk in front of a room full of people, it's a real challenge to do that. To stand and to deliver your message without all the theatrics of all this. I'm going to continue to do this because I like it. But to stand still, to lift our head, and to encounter where we're uncertain in life, to know that God is near, that all the fear and all the things, the signs of the times that are happening, it's really hard for us to have that courage to stand still, not to duck, cover, and run, or go down to our basements and see if that emergency toilet's still working or not, all right, the tornado toilet. It takes courage to stand still. But yet, that, I believe, is what Jesus is calling us to on this first Sunday of Advent. To stand still, to be people of love, to be people of prayer, is the most important thing we can remember in the first Sunday of Advent. We stand still to witness. When we stand still and we are among others, we are saying, I am here. I bear witness. And you don't even need to be able to say that. A few months ago, there was a public meeting in the town, and all sorts of things have happened in public meetings. I'm not going to say even which public meeting it was, but there was a public meeting, and most of the clergy, nearly all of the clergy in the little city of Wyoming got together and said, how can we support the community? And it wasn't a large act, but it was an act of love and compassion, and we didn't stand because we didn't need to stand, but we went and we simply sat. We sat among those who would be speaking at the public meeting. We sat before those who would be conducting the meeting. It wasn't miraculous. It didn't take a great amount of courage, but yet the result was that it gave a bit of hope. It just changed enough of the perspective of folks in that meeting who could be anxious and aggravated to say that we are willing to bear witness. We are willing to stand still, to love, and to pray. And so my earnest desire for us as followers of Jesus is we take that call seriously, that we have the courage in this season of hopeful expectation, that we be willing to stand still, to love, and to pray. Amen.